Morning, everybody, and afternoon. First, a word about online etiquette. Please mute your microphone, and if you have questions later on, please be respectful, ask questions succinctly, and give others their turn. And in case of an unwelcome intrusion by others, just leave the Zoom meeting and re-enter, then we'll continue on. We began these webinars more than a year ago and have had a remarkable group of guests discussing topics including club ownership, maintaining enrollment, coaching, teaching, refereeing, mental health and athletes, and other topics that are widely interesting. And the webinars have given us all the opportunity to sit virtually with the guests, learn from them, and speak directly with them. We no longer know them as only just names that we have heard about or inscriptions on plaques, but real people, real judokas, who have laid the foundations of the community of judo. You may think that today's guest needs no introduction. He doesn't, but Mitchell's already done it. I don't think he mentioned that Jim also won gold at the Maccabean game, bronze at the World Championships, in addition to the other World Championship level victories that he's had. But the real benefit of Jim Bregman's life in judo is much more than a passing comment about international medals. He's devoted his life to the sport as a competitor, teacher, administrator, but he's also used the themes of the gentle way as guidance for his career in government service and beyond, especially in the realm of assisting others in need. Sensei Shihan Jim Bregman holds the Kodokan rank of Judan, 10th degree black belt. It's my great privilege to welcome him to the USJF Webinar Series. Good afternoon, Jim, and thank you for being our guest today, despite your family obligations that you've told me about, and also the technical challenges that we have right now. Again, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chuck, and everyone on this call, and I apologize for my technical incompetence. I have an MBA in computer science in 1969, so I don't know where to click. So everything I know about computers is totally obsolete.
Well, Mitchell, take note of that, please. All right. So every time you make fun of me, which is just about constantly, just remember, I thought I knew what I was doing. I just, the computers don't cooperate.
No.
As we get started, let me just show you something that you may know about, and I found out about this spring. It's a book. It's Olympian Jim Bregman, an advocate for American judo. I think that everybody on this call would be interested in reading this. It's a fast read. There's a lot of pictures in it and a lot of discussions about people that we've heard about in the past. And Jim knows or knew everybody and has a lot of interesting, I think, insights into a lot of these folks. Don Drager, for example, Sensei Ishikawa, and so forth. And I think it was Doug Rogers from Canada, and more people, some of whom I had never heard of, but it's really an extensive discussion, and I think that we would all benefit from that. I want to get going here, and usually what we've been asking the guests is how they started in judo. That's almost as mundane as what's your favorite throw, which we won't be asking for because we already know that one. But it's been interesting because different people have had different experiences in getting into judo. But there's something in particular I want to emphasize because Jim and I have talked a little bit about this. But Jim, can you talk to us about you as a 12-year-old who walked into a dojo and had a beginner's class and like where it was and who your senseis were? And then I'm going to ask you something that immediately follows that. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Green Valley, Virginia, which is a suburb or a part of Arlington, Virginia. And the Pentagon is about 10 or 15 minutes from my parents' store. We lived over top of the store. And my mom and dad noticed that over a number of months, I had been beaten up. But I'd never tell them anything about what happened to me. I was very quiet because the kid that was beating me up was a lady who was a cook in the carryout restaurant part of the grocery store, and I didn't want any problems for her as a child. So my mother saw in the Washington Post an advertisement for the Washington Judo Club at the Officers Athletic Club of the Pentagon. And she took me down there. And in those days, you could actually drive up to the back of the Pentagon, park your car about 20 feet from the entrance of the Officers Athletic Club and just walk in the front door, which we did. And she got me registered for a judo class. And the teachers were, over time, Ray Vandermark, Jimmy Takamori, Don Dreger, and Sensei Ishikawa. So once I got registered, I got through the beginner's class, and I really enjoy it. And since Mr. Vandermark lived about 10 blocks from our house, he would pick me up every day and take me to the dojo at the Officers Athletic Club at the Pentagon. Now, in today's world, you can't get near the Officers Athletic Club of the Pentagon or the Pentagon unless you have multiple IDs and various accesses, because it's extraordinarily secure. But in those days, things were a lot easier, simpler, and actually, to some degree, I think, happier. So that's how I started judo at the Officers Athletic Club, which hosted the Washington Judo Club. Hello?
I think that what I'm particularly interested in is what you just referred to, and that is after you finish the beginner's class. I understand from you that you started practicing 6 days a week. All right, now you're a 12-year-old or 13-year-old kid, and you're doing something 6 days a week. And even back then, when there weren't any cell phones, that's a lot of doing whatever you're doing. So you were doing judo 6 days a week, and just looking ahead, you were Shodan by the time you were 15. Okay, so
Yes.
it's 12 to 15. You got 3 years, and you're working out 6 days a week. All right, this is confusing, not the confused, it's a mysterious thing for me. Why did you work out 6 days a week? Was it just because you had nothing else to do, or fascination with judo? I assume you had other stuff like class and homework and.
Oh, sure. I had a lot of other things to do, but I really took to judo. It was a place where I felt secure. That's number one, because I was very insecure. And people treated everyone with dignity. And it was multicultural, and people were kind. And for a kid that was traumatized and somewhat leery of other human beings, this was a mutually beneficial environment. Have we heard that before? So I went to the Officers Athletic Club with Vandermark as often as I could, and many, many weeks it was 6 days a week, 5, 6, 4, 3, depending on what was going on. But if you put in the time, you get the benefits. And with those senseis and mentors who treated me like a human being.
Oh, you weren't
I
just a I guess a uni-focused teenager. I mean, you were a wrestler too, weren't you? A wrestler and did a lot of cardiovascular training. Probably back at a time where very few people did cardiovascular training. Nobody had
Yeah.
nobody had spandex either. Well, I don't think.
No. Well, yeah, as I became more competent, I joined the wrestling team at Wakefield High School in Arlington and wrestled. And also I did road work with the cross country team And of course, I couldn't do cross country, but a friend of mine, Bill Cleveland, would run with me for 10 or 12 miles, and then they would leave me in the dust. Then I'd go to wrestling practice, and my wrestling coach got mad at me because I reverted to a thing called judo throws and pinned people, and he wanted me to be pure wrestling. He didn't understand what I was doing. But after a while, he became accommodated to it and saw the value in my takedowns. And I placed third in the state championships my junior and senior year as a wrestler, while continuing to train with judo that whole time.
Okay. I got a question about the types of training, and the question comes up not only at this level, but at levels that are much more advanced. When I was a kid learning judo, this was in the early 1960s, newaza was considered not real judo. And in fact, when there was a guy who would repeatedly win his division, an adult who would win his division because he was a wrestler, and he won most of his matches on the mat. And we kids would sit back and say, "Hey, that's not really judo. He's just a wrestler. What does he know?" So things have changed, obviously, and maybe in that section of the Northeast, they just had some sort of a problem with newaza. But how did you find, or do you remember, the proportion of standing and newaza, or basically was newaza seen as something negative, or was it a real part of a real man's judo?
At the WJC at the time, it was a real part of real man's judo. We did a lot of randori, tachiwaza, but we also did newaza. The ratio was probably mostly like 75% tachiwaza and 25% newaza, but we were always taught that after your throw, you followed up with a pin. So we would throw and get into some kind of pin. So that was basically just part of judo. Nobody thought that it was demeaning to do newaza, but the ratio was in favor of tachiwaza.
Okay, just I guess maybe it was in Boston that they didn't believe in newaza, or that in that general area. And it took a long time for me to understand that newaza was really part of it. And there's probably a lot of my contemporaries who felt the same way from that area.
Right. We just considered it as a continuation of the throw. It was just what you did after you threw. Now, obviously, when you're doing randori, you didn't always follow up with a newaza hold, but it was just kind of normal. That's what you did.
A couple of other things. You said that you actually did weight training, I guess, weight training in high school. Was that related mainly to wrestling, or did you see the applicability of weight training to judo too?
Well, Don Drager was a huge advocate of supplementing judo activity with weight training. So at the Pentagon, we also did weight training. They had a huge gym with Olympic sets and various kinds of machines of the time. And we also did weight training 2 to 3 times a week. So the weight training at the dojo also supported my wrestling. And during the wrestling practices, we take a 15 or 20-minute break and train on weight. So I never understood that there was a problem or a dichotomy. It just seemed like all of the things you had to do to get in shape to be a good wrestler or a good judoka.
Okay. All right, so you're 15 years old and you're a shodan, and then you go through high school And a couple of years later, I can just say, well, you decided to go to Japan. It's much more complicated than that. Can you talk about your decision? And actually, I wanted to ask a question before that, because this relates to many things that you referred to in the book, or many times you referred to this. You wanted to be a technician. Can you explain what that means to you, or when you first started to realize that that's what you wanted to do?
Yeah. Um, there are two ways to win a match, or there are two ways to do randori. Actually, I'm oversimplifying everything. But from time to time, as you practice, you would throw someone effortlessly. You didn't even feel anything. You were just part of a process, and the person was thrown, and you didn't consciously get into thinking about it or using your muscles or doing whatever. You just did the throw, and the Kazushi, Tsukuri, and Kake were so perfect that the throw was executed and you landed on top of him, okay? And those kinds of experiences and the teaching of Sensei Ishikawa, Draeger, Takemori uh, made it clear to me that you can win by brute force, by bullying, not physically bullying, but by using brute force to overcome an opponent and beat him, okay? And for competitive purposes, that's fine. You won the match, everything's cool. Might have looked a little ugly, a little strained, but it wasn't elegant. And early on, I wanted the experience physiologically, psychologically, and emotionally of having that unique experience where the waza was so well executed that you unconsciously did it and didn't know specifically how it was done. But to get there, you do thousands of hours of uchikomi, you do thousands of hours of randori, and you practice and practice and practice. And eventually, your timing is so good and your technique is so highly developed that you can throw effortlessly. So my objective, psychologically, physiologically, was to use the power and strength that I had in my body and apply that to my opponent's weakest spot as quickly as I could. So that's your maximum efficiency with a minimum of effort. And over the person goes. And that experience to me became the objective, to use mushin or mindlessness to apply these techniques in such a way that it was effortless. So if that makes any sense, becoming a wazashi means that you can do multiple throws with that psychological mindset, and you don't even really fully intellectually know that you're throwing. It just occurs. You react. And this is a little philosophical, but there's something in the cosmos called the cosmic conscience, which pervades the universe. And getting into that kind of mindset while you're doing judo and throwing as an automatic process, you don't even realize you're doing it. It's a body reaction and it's a psychological reaction. And you feel in close contact with, I'll call it nature, whatever you want to call it. So you realize at those moments that there's something greater than you driving these processes.
Um, was there anything that, and I have to think back on my own my own history, and all of us probably have to do that. That it all helps to define what we think about things like the elegance and versus physicality that you've spoken about in the past. Did you have to consciously say that you're not interested in winning, or at least tell yourself that winning wasn't the real goal? It was this sense of perfection, the technicianhood that you were seeking?
Yeah, the winning is a byproduct of the the technical aspiration of being a technician, a wazashi. So it's not that I didn't want to win. I think I wanted to win, but the way you want to win is by executing the near perfect throw and overcoming your opponent in such a way that it's almost effortless. And in that sense, yeah, I wanted to win, but that was a subset of wanting to do an elegant move to get the win. So the more elegant and the more practiced your combinations and counters and all of the varied techniques that you're using become, the more you win. So um, it's a cycle of positive reinforcement. You do the elegant thing and you win. Then you want to do more of an elegant move and you win again. Okay. Now, when you lose, that's not a defeat, that's a learning experience. So you have to lose a hell of a lot before you win. So losing should not be looked on as a defeat. It should be looked on as a learning experience, and you'd sit back and think about what happened and then try and adjust your training and physical activity to get your techniques to overcome the skillful thing that this opponent did to you. And the opponent is not your opponent psychologically or physically in a sense. It is the tool that sharpens your technique. He or she is teaching you how to become a more virtuous and better judoka by challenging you to overcome whatever this individual is doing. And they all do whatever it is differently. And as you learn all of these things, it becomes motor memory and psychological memory, and you advance and overcome, I'll call it the loss, but I look at that as a learning experience. And trust me, at Meiji University, you get one hell of a lot of learning experiences.
All right, which brings us back to my previous question. You're 17 years old and you decide, I think I'll go to Japan. I know that Don Draeger was trying to convince your parents. Could you talk about that? Why he had so much influence to get your parents to ship you off to, well, not ship you off, but to say, hey, he can go to Japan. Sure, he wants to be a wazashi. Can you talk about that?
Sure. Don Draeger and my family became very close. And on frequent occasions, he would come over and we would have dinner over the top of our grocery store in our apartment. And the same with Ishikawa and Sensei Takamori. And we'd all go to each other's homes and have dinners. And it became a very close-knit community. We'd party at Takimori's house with everybody. We'd party somewhere else, and we got to be very close. And Don and my mom and dad developed a very close friendship. And actually, my mom chatted with Don about various things that he had going on and helped him through whatever it is. I don't know what they were talking about most of the time. But anyway, we were very close to Sensei Draeger. And as I was approaching graduating from high school, he sent a letter to my parents, suggesting that I come over to Tokyo to the Ichigaya house and train with him and go to Sophia University. And one of the prerequisites of my going anywhere in my family was that I had to get a college education. So there was a lot of trepidation about that. My father, who loved judo and enjoyed it, was also on Okinawa staging for the invasion of Japan. He had some misgivings about going to Japan, but my mother and father talked about it in a meeting around the kitchen table, where I was told to go to my bedroom and close the door. It was a very small apartment. So somehow mom prevailed on dad, or they mutually agreed. I don't know how it went. And because Don was a mentor and a close family friend, they agreed to allow me to go to Japan on a one-way ticket and participate in the Ichigaya experience.
Okay. That was probably not your typical route for a 17 or 18-year-old young guy to go to Japan.
No.
Probably not. Yeah. Before I forget it, and I don't want to forget it because I'm going to ask you something about being in Japan. I have spoken with one of the attendees here, Connie Halporn, the videographer and photographer from New York. There she is. And I asked her about your throw. And she told me, she described your throwing as something I had never heard before. She said it was lyrical, beautiful and lyrical. So I just want to attribute that to Connie, who's on the call right now. I thought that was a beautiful description, and I think that what you've been describing over the last 5 or 10 minutes fits in very clearly with that. That's a big lesson or takeaway that I'm taking already. This is something very nice. When you got to Japan,
Thank you, Connie. Connie has seen me over many years, and that described it. Yes, and I'm very touched by that. Thank you, Connie.
nice word, lyrical.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in Japan and you're still a teenager and you're learning a lot of lessons, like flying through the air and hitting the mat. When did you become competent? Or I assume that you were competent in the United States, then you hit Japan, and it's all different at Meiji University. What was it about Meiji that made you something special in the judo world?
Wow. If you take a high school kid who plays football and you put him on a Super Bowl football team at the NFL, he's going to be a little out of his league. So that's about what happened. I won the regional judo championships and probably might have placed at the nationals in Tampa, except I hurt my back as a 18-year-old or a 17-year-old. So according to the standards of the competition in the United States, I was a good high school player. But then when you go to the NFL and one of these linebackers hits you, you suddenly realize that your level of competence doesn't stand up in any way, shape, or form to the multiple people you're rondoring with and doing judo with, who are about 72 times better than you are in every respect. And you get a lot of airtime. And airtime is the equivalent of learning experiences. And a gentleman named Seki, who was my senpai, kind of took an interest in me which meant that he had the distinct privilege of throwing me at will anywhere he wanted. And several other dozens of people you randori with do the same thing. So I think in America, we have this idea that you go to Japan and people sit and they teach you judo by talking to you. And you learn judo by listening to your sensei and doing a few uchikomi and playing around a little bit. And that's, you know, what I grew up with. I thought that was pretty cool. But at Meiji, you learn judo osmotically by doing it. And the same thing at the Kodokan Randori sessions or Nichidai Randori sessions. So over time, about 18 months to 2 years, at the Kohaku Shiais, you're doing a little better. So after about 2 years, I could stand up and I could win a few matches. So yeah, it's not verbal teaching or demonstrations that you're doing or things like that. It's actual hard randori, day in and day out. A lot of uchikomi, a lot of warming up, a lot of weight training. We'd get up 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. We'd go to Jochi Daigaku, Sophia University's field. We would do a quarter-mile run, 50 sit-ups, push-ups, squats, quarter-mile run. Do that 4 or 5 times, run up and down the stadium steps, get cleaned up, go to the Keisho, which was the police dojo where they had people that were in their 35 and 45 and older who were very strong, powerful, and they threw you around a lot. Then you have some lunch, do a little homework, teach a little English, go to Meiji, get thrown a lot, have a little dinner. After you go to the Kodokan, and then you go off to Sophia University at night from 7 to 10 at night, and you study. And the day starts all over again the next day. And if you can survive that for 2 years, you actually can stand up. And the first Kohaku, and I'm just going to give you an example. This isn't what really happened, but let's say the first Kohaku, you get thrown. The second one, you get thrown. These are monthly shiais, okay, at the Kodokan. Then after a while, you actually throw somebody and you get to the next guy and maybe he draws or throws you and on it goes. And one of the things that happened in Japan that was very beneficial was that I met George Kerr. George was about 2 years ahead of me. And he was an incredible judoka, 3rd dan, 4th dan. And at the Kohakus, he would throw 3 to 5 guys. And he would always come over to me and say, Jim, you did a good job. No matter what happened, he'd always say, Jim, you were good. You did a good job. And I'm thinking, well, I got thrown the first match. And then I'd throw 2 people and he'd come over and say, Jim, you're looking better. You're looking good. You're getting there. You're getting there. It's going to take some time. You're getting there. And eventually, I could throw 3 to 5 guys in my dan rank, whatever that was. And, you know, it took about 3 years. And the other gentleman I met was Sid Hoare. Sid and I became very fast friends, and we became training partners. So you can't, in my opinion, do this alone because you're going to get discouraged. You're not going to want to get up at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning because your body hurts. You're just not going to want to do it. It's too hard. You don't want to go back to Meiji because they're going to throw you all over the place. You don't want to go to the Kodokan because they got really big guys there from all over the world and they're going to throw you all over the place. But if you have a training partner who's going through the same thing and encouraging you like Sid did for me and I did for him, then you get through it together. So you build a camaraderie. You've got a guy like George Kerr that's encouraging you, have Don Drager that's encouraging you. You have a gentleman named John Blooming from Holland who's encouraging you. And it takes a support group, to be frank. So you need a support group. And with that kind of support group, the mutual welfare and benefit kicks in. And you realize that, wow, yeah, I actually threw that guy somehow. And okay, that throw worked because I did this ajiwaza. And if I do that ashiwaza, then this other throw will work. And then if I do this spinning thing, Mawari Komi Uchimata, that kind of works. And if that didn't work and I do a thing called a switch, I can throw the guy down and on it goes. But you can't train, in my opinion, okay, everybody has to find their own way. It's called the gentle way. I don't know where the gentle part came in, but everybody has to find their own way. So, you know, some people can, I guess, train by themselves, but certainly our group in Japan could not. And I had the distinct privilege at some point of being selected for the Kenshusei program with my good friend and partner in crime, a gentleman named Hayward Nishioka. And we would go on a Saturday, I think it was Saturday, to a morning training class for kata. And all of the senseis, Kotani, Mufune, Daigo, they would be teaching us all of the kata. So we'd go through 2 hours of kata teaching, learning, and experience on Saturdays. And the result of that was that Hayward and I got rather proficient at doing various katas. And surprisingly, we were selected to do the opening ceremony, and I think it was 1963 for the All Japan Championships, which was terrifying because I thought if we made a mistake, we'd be shot. But anyway, we actually got up and did a very good kata to open the ceremony. And that was quite an honor for two young guys to be selected. So that was an indication that Mr. Nishioka and Mr. Bregman were an accepted part of the judo community and were considered both at that time wazashi. So that was a good thing.
We've heard about the Nage no Kata and seen that and discussed it somewhat. And Hayward himself was a guest on this webinar series, and I had a picture. Everybody's seen this picture. It's a low camera angle, so Hayward looks like his toes are scraping the rafters on this uranage that you're doing. Now,
Yeah.
by the way, there's a lot more pictures in that book that Jim has written. A lot more pictures of the Nage no Kata of the '63 All Japan Championships. It's worth taking a look at. But that was a special event.
Yeah, and Hayward and I were quite honored to be able to be selected, frankly, to do that. That was an amazing experience. And I just wanted to tell people, if you decide to get the book, there's a version number 3 is the one you should get. It's on Amazon, but I went through a number of iterations and might go through a number more, but the 3rd version is more comprehensive, I think. Anyway, doing that with Hayward at that All Japan Championship was one of the greatest honors I've ever had in my life.
Let's shift a little bit away from training. We've all heard and talked about and probably tried to teach how judo has advantages, philosophical advantages and physical advantages in later life. And You have referred to it as a mental awareness of your physical capabilities for the physical part, but also philosophically, it appears to have helped you in your own government job for 30 years, and and I think in government and also in private industry after that. Could you talk about the lessons that you feel that judo helped you, or how judo helped you in dealing with those questions and affecting your life in the years after you were a competitor?
Sure. Um, Judo teaches patience. Judo teaches perseverance. Judo teaches persistence. And if you're patient, persistent, and you persevere, you can get through a lot of stuff. Um, the other thing that Judo teaches you is mutual welfare and benefit and respect for others. So, respect for others means that you listen to people and you listen closely. You watch them, you talk to them, you get to know them. Um, you observe different activities that go on, you soak it up, and you begin to psychologically and physiologically understand where all these people are coming from, and can then, with their guidance and assistance as a moderator, if you will, with all of their help, reach a mutually objective position to accomplish a mission. And the other thing that I think judo teaches you is to be successful. As I said earlier, you need a team, you need training partners, you need people who are like minded, who are capable. So, some executives are reluctant to, I'm going to make a generalization, but they don't like to be challenged. They don't like to be thought of as equal to some of the people they're working with. That kind of old style executive management where I'm the boss and you're the workers and you got to do what I tell you, um, that typically leads to failure. But if you hire a team of people who are more experienced than you, smarter than you, more capable than you, and you listen to them, and the team comes to a consensus on how to accomplish a particular mission, then you and the entire organization are focused on the objective. And judo teaches you to focus and remain calm, whatever is happening. You calmly tie your belt at the end of the match. You make sure everything is straight. You stand up, you bow, you honor your opponent, and you come off. So remaining serenely calm in all situations, respecting everybody, and gaining a consensus on what is the best way to accomplish whatever it is we're trying to accomplish. I think judo taught me that because of people like Drager, Takemori, Ishikawa, George Kerr, Sid Hoare, John Blooming, Anton Giesing, Hayward Nishioka, and others. This is something I learned, and I learned it from judo. Um, I went to American University. I received an MBA in business administration with an emphasis on economic development for developing countries and impoverished countries. They didn't really teach me, in a sense, all of that. They taught me some technical management skills and whatnot, but not that kind of cool, calm, collected, listening approach and problem solving. They paid lip service to it, but I think through judo, you really understood it. Does that help clarify some of that?
I think it's very good. That's a rather unique discussion that we haven't had before, and I'm glad that you've gotten into that in that depth. I have a couple of other things that relate to that before we throw it open to questions. A couple of things. First is you and I have discussed how judo gives you a physical awareness of your physical capabilities. You know what your body can and can't do, and that helps you as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any further comment on that?
Yeah. Um, the first fight I ever got into was when I was 13 and I beat up the bully. I threw him with an ippon suenage, ended up in a kesagatame and beat his face to a bloody pulp. He reached for a knife in his back pocket and I took his wrist and uh, got him away from his knife. I beat him up some more and he stood up and I told him to run away. And there were people around. This was a bunch of kids my age on a basketball court. And this bully had tried to take my brother's bike and I ran after him. I got the bike. Then he attacked me and I took care of him. And then I looked around at the crowd that was watching and I said, okay, who's next? Who wants to go through this? Because I'm tired of being hit. Come and get me now because this is your last chance. And that was the first and last fight I was ever in my life. So flash forward to a number of confrontations that never ended up in any physical activity at all because the opponent who is angry or wants to beat you up for some reason because you're an old man or because you're wearing a blue shirt or because he thought you were flirting with his girlfriend or for whatever reason was going through this idiot's mind, he comes over and starts screaming and yelling or doing whatever and wants you to step outside and all of this stuff. You've probably all seen that happen, particularly in the movies maybe where they go out and beat each other up or whatever. Well, when an aggressor comes at an experienced judoka like that, something changes and the judoka goes into his mushin, calm, cool, and collected mode. You're totally aware of all of your surroundings. You are intuitively aware of where his hands are, where his body is, what he's doing. And this is all instantaneous, okay? It just the way it is. It's just the way it is. So at that point, this aggressor sees no fear. There's absolutely no fear in this person he is going to assault. And Kano said, if you fear, you have already lost. But there's no fear. You're just waiting for the Shiite to say, for the referee to say Hajime. You know what's going to happen. And as this guy's blowing and bovulating or whatever, you just look at him and say, look, you should calm down, relax. You need to go away. And, this can end nicely or can end in a problem, but I don't want it to end in a problem. I want it to be mutually beneficial. I don't want to hurt anybody. I think I wasn't looking at your girlfriend. I didn't steal the cup of coffee or whatever it was, so just chill out, go away, relax and take it easy because And then if he keeps going, you say something like, well, you know, I know what this outcome is going to be. You don't know anything about me. And trust me, it would be in your best interest not to continue this or try and harm me, because I know what the result is going to be and you don't. And typically at that point, they walk away totally confused. Because, particularly now that I'm a much older person, a young 25 or 35-year-old could get pissed off at me and suggest that he wants to take me out in the yard and beat the hell out of me. But that's not going to happen, because I'm going to talk him down. And because I'm not scared, there's no fear. All there is, if you will, is a samurai warrior looking at a dumbbell who is aggressively trying to hurt this guy. And the warrior knows what's going to happen at the end, and it's not going to be pretty for this guy, whatever happens. So you talk him down. And that has happened to me a number of times, particularly as I got older. Some of the younger people thought that, you know, maybe I can take this old man. I was going on a trip, and I had just in my computer case a shoulder bag. I just had a change of clothes, and I was just going for 2 days. So I had my toiletries and a change of clothes in a computer bag that hung over my shoulder. And I was at a Greyhound bus station in a bad section of Washington, D.C., next to Union Station. The bus got delayed, and I wanted to go up to one of my favorite Irish restaurants. So I was walking down the street, and 3 19-year-olds stopped me. One got in front of me, and 2 were kind of on the side a little bit. And they were yelling and telling me to give them my wristwatch, and they wanted my computer, and they wanted all my money. And they were very belligerent. And I said, no, look, guys, you need to go back home and go to school. I'm not going to give you my wristwatch. I'm not going to give you my computer bag. I'm not going to give you all my money. I think you need to get off the street and go to school, get educated, and not try and do this on the street, because it's going to end bad for you. The kid said, well, I have a gun and I'm going to shoot you. I said, okay, well, if you pull out a gun, things are going to get bad. I don't think you have a gun. But if you do have a gun, then things are really going to get bad. You're going to get hurt. Now, what I suggest is the 3 of you, okay, take your hand off of my computer bag, because there's no computer in there. If you steal this bag, you're going to get my underwear, my shirt, and a pair of pants. That's all you're going to get. So, guys, do me a favor, walk away so we don't have to get in trouble. And guess what? They walked away, and I walked across the street, and I went and I had my lunch at the Irish pub near the train station, and I got on the Greyhound bus and went to New York. So, you know, that could have ended badly for them. I had no doubt that it would, but I didn't want to hurt them. They're just kids doing stupid stuff. And as I walked across the street, I turned back and they were running away. So that's one of a number of incidents that I've had. But whenever I go into a place, I'm totally aware of where the exits are. I like to sit facing the door. I like to know what's going on. It's just automatic. And I think spatial awareness is something you learn from Judo, and it contributes to your safety later in life. I grew up in a Black ghetto. I'm very comfortable in different environments, with different cultures, with different people. I'm not afraid of anything. And that I'm not saying that to be arrogant. I'm just saying that because of the judo training, nothing could be worse than Meiji University, trust me. So
Well,
that's about it.
thank you for that. We are over 1 hour, but I just have a couple of other things, short, brief things
Sure.
on a much more mundane level. Besides facing down three guys on a Washington D.C. street, just the judo itself and the physicality that's involved with judo will give you the opportunity for an active lifestyle and a mental attitude toward good physical shape, physical fitness as you get older. You and I have talked about that briefly, and I think that's one of the best things to do. Most of us aren't going to go hanging out down by Union Station looking to intimidate people. But there's a practical aspect, there's a practical benefit for that. Last thing I would like to ask you about is to ask you to comment on something that's in your book. And here it is. My accomplishments in judo are the fruits of my many teachers and methods and mentors who guided me on how to find my very own gentle way. I haven't seen the phrase, my very own gentle way. Could you expand on that?
Yes. I think every kid deserves a mentor. And I think our dojos have many senseis who are mentors. And I think it's a healthy environment. And we all have a life's journey. And judo is called the gentle way, but it's not the same way for everybody. Each of us has to find their own gentle way in judo and in life. And judo helps you, judo supports you, your senseis support you, your competitors support you, your students support you. And making life better for all of these people at the dojo enhances their experience on the outside. And some become artists, some become musicians, some become executives, some become whatever it is they want to become in life. Some travel the world, some stay home, whatever it is. So you have to find your own gentle way. And fortunately for me, I've had a very fruitful life. I'm very grateful to all of the teachers I've had over the years, to all of my friends, and I just feel very fortunate that I found a very good way. And I hope others can seek out their own journey and their own way. But I do think that judo contributes a lot to a more positive and fruitful lifestyle than other things you could be doing.
Thank you, Jim. I'd like to throw it open for questions. You can go to down at the bottom of your Zoom screen where it says raise hand, or I think there's other, not just raise hand is on mine. So figure out how to raise your hand if you have questions for Jim Bregman.
You can also go to the chat if anybody has a question.
Okay.
Nope.
I think that there's Eric.
Sensei Bregman, I know there was a hiatus in your judo participation in your life. I wonder if you just mentioned what drove you out of judo for the moment, but more importantly, if you would expound a little bit on what brought you back to judo after you had your hiatus.
Well, I'm not exactly sure which hiatus you're talking about. But I've had to get away from judo at times because of family commitments, because of work commitments, because of judo commitments that I've made overseas, for example. But I've always felt it important to have a good administration in judo, which has been a challenge over the years. So on probably 3 or 4 occasions, I've left, and the judo organization I was proud to be part of fell apart. I tried to come back and help it. I left. So yeah, but I've never really left judo in the sense of not loving the sport. What I don't like is some of the contentiousness and some of the things that happened, frankly, in the USJA, which were abysmal mismanagement and dysfunction concerning resources and things like that. But over the years, for example, with Camp Olympus, we used all of the profits from Camp Olympus to send teams to Europe. We sent a team to South Africa during apartheid with Alan Coage, who is Black, as the team captain. Teams going to Europe. Learned a lot about European judo, but I do find it difficult to stay involved the older I get in the administration of the USJA in particular. So does that help, Eric?
Yeah.
I guess so. I view it as you came back to help. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, that's what I tried to do.
Other questions for Jim Bregman? Raise your hand. There's got to be questions out there. Well, I want to thank Jim for his time and sharing his experience, and especially for his perspective on the themes of the gentle way. I think that it's, for me, it has been a more comprehensive discussion of the gentle way and how judo's philosophy has impacted his life than I've heard before. So not only life on the mat, but life off the mat. I also want to thank all who attended today's webinar. This will certainly be an important addition to our own understanding of judo and our ability to promote these messages to others. And with that, let me swing it back over to the president of USJF, Mitchell Palacio.
Hayward had a question. Hayward?
Unmute, Hayward.
You have to unmute.
I just wanted to say thank you very much to Jim.
Thank you, Hayward.
Was he able to hear me?
Yes, I heard you, and I want to thank you. It's not often that you have a lifelong friend that's as close as we are. I really appreciate your friendship over the years.
And I appreciate yours too. Thanks a lot, Jim.
And thank you.
And on behalf of the United States Judo Federation, I would like to thank Sensei Bregman and our moderator, Dr. Madani, for their contribution to this great Zoom webinar. In closing, continue to believe in and be proud of your USJF. Have a good evening and good night.